But you have, along that front pipe, you have 8 sort of par lights and 2 of those moving headlights I was talking about. So those are channels 1 through 8 in the boxes there, or 1 through 8 on our faders. So if I were to just bring up the first fader, I'm going to have 1 light come on. And by bringing up the fader, you'll see the box now has an intensity value listed under it. If I were zoomed further out, I wouldn't see that number, but because I'm fit to my screen, it is showing that. But the box is turned white because it's roughly white. It's more pinkish because of the nature of that fixture. But it's an approximation of what it's trying to make white light out of. And it shows you you're at 100%. If I were to bring this down to, say, 50%, you'll watch the box sort of dims down as well. It's giving you that visual representation of what's happening with the lights. And if I wasn't zoomed so far in, you'd still see it is sort of a dimmer version of that color.
Could you point to where the stage is on that screen? Is it towards you? Okay.
Stage is to the top of the screen because presumably you're facing it, even though we're sideways right now.
I get it.
I'm the stage in relation to that.
Yeah. We just turned this way so that way people could fit behind with my short cables here. But so each of the first 20 sliders corresponds to a light. If you had more lights, this console could do up to 80 individual fixtures across 2 pages of 40 faders. Because you only have 20, you don't need to necessarily worry about that, but if you needed to switch between pages, there would be, if you had more fixtures patched, there's a little button here that says channel 1 through 40. If you had things in that upper range, there'd be another button that said 41 through 80. And you would just select that and it would change which page of these faders you're operating.
What did you say? Call them faders?
Faders, yeah.
Oh, faders. Okay.
For fading up and down.
Right.
So switching, if we had the additional lights, switching between page 1 and 2, you'd still have the same sliders, they'd just be assigned to different numbers.
Yep. Which, if you were to look closely at these buttons, there's a smaller number next to the 1 through 40. You have a 41 through 80 in much smaller font listed there. But we're only concerned with your 20 lights at the moment.
Good question. I don't know if this is necessary, but those buttons on top of the screen, what are those?
These 4 faders? So each of these corresponds to a little touchscreen button below it. The first one is for bumps, which means if I have this off and I just press this button, I bump the button. Actually, at the moment, I don't think it's programmed to do that, but at the moment, it's not set up to actually do that. But you can program it so that when you bump the button, it brings up a thing. I think if I'm in playback, it does it. Yeah. But if I were to bring that fader down above bumps, it no longer lets bump values get communicated to the lights. The next one is the playbacks fader, which I'll get to sort of what the difference between channel faders and playback faders are. But if playbacks is turned down, it's not going to let me do the bring up one fader that is like my whole stage, because that is a playback and the master playback fader is down. Similarly, cues for those sequenced recorded cues we might do, if the main cue fader is down, our cues will not run. So generally, leave all 4 of these up at all times, unless you're very specifically trying to like prevent a thing from working.
If somebody came in and they just wanted to control the board like an analog board that they're used to, this is the main controller they would be using for that. You're saying that affects the...
So as long as this button that says channels 1 through 40 is connected, then the first 20 faders is the intensity of your first 20 lights.
Do they need these faders up for
These
that?
should stay up, yes.
Would they affect any other functionality if they don't want the grouping and that type of thing? I mean, would they leave it down to simulate an analog board, or it wouldn't matter?
It wouldn't really matter, because unless you've selected the playback option, you're going to be in direct control of channels.
Okay.
But so this is only controlling the intensity. But like I said, each of these lights has color changing capabilities. So the way you control the color, and this is useful if you're then coming in to record things later, or if you're just playing around and trying to set a look. When you select a channel, so let's look at that first light I had up before, right? Mm-hmm. That's in its sort of approximation of white. It's just red, green, and blue are all at full, sort of mixing to a sort of pinkish white at the moment. So let's say we want that light to be blue. When we've brought it up, the light underneath the fader popped on, and a green box is around the channel box. That tells us we are selected. And we can, there's a small button here that has a little color teardrop and some fader symbols. So I can either hit the touchscreen for that or the button below it, and it will bring up my attributes page, my parameters page, which is basically saying, what are the things other than intensity that this light can do? And if it had any position options, we can control it here. This light doesn't. If it had any beam options, which this one does, it has a zoom option, which I'll get to in a moment. We can get to that from this page as well. But right now we're concerned with color mix. And this color button has a couple of options. I can press the word color mix to scroll between my three options. The first one is this it's called a color space. It sort of shows you the rainbow and the fade between white and color. And I can just click anywhere on this and drag my finger to the different colors I want to make. So I can go to red, and the light goes red. I can drag my finger over to green, and now the light's green. And this could work if I had multiple lights selected as well. Right now we're just looking at one light.
Do you have to drag your finger? Could you just press it?
You could.
Yeah, so I could do like that. Okay.
Yeah. I just happen to have fat fingers, so I usually have to drag it to where I want it to end up anyway.
You wouldn't do that during the middle of the performance. That's to set it.
Yeah, this would generally be like if you're setting up for something, whether it's to record it or to just set it and then people come in and do something, you could do this. The other way to think about color, aside from this sort of color space, is these little color chips, so pre-programmed colors. So I can come here, and this is how I would generally do it, because this way I don't have to worry about how precise I am on that color screen.
Just tell me how you got back into that again, out of the other. Oh.
Sure. So if we want to go back to our channel layout, there's this grid symbol down here where the power button.
I don't mean that. I mean from your palette display.
Sure.
How did you get from there to there?
So the button that says color mix, sort of in the middle of these attributes.
Oh, okay.
If you tap that, it scrolls between your different color control options.
Okay.
So for our color chips, and we could record our own if we had mixed to something we really like and we're like, I want to save that, you can. But there's a ton pre-programmed in here, which will probably be more than enough for you. But so I can just come here and say, I want it to be red, or I want it to be orange. And it's going to tell the light to do the best it can to make that color. Different lights are better at mixing than others, so it's going to be as close as it can approximate. Now you'll also notice the button under our fader changes color to match. So if I bring the intensity down, it's still glowing at that color, which tells me when I bring that fader up, I'm bringing up a green light. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have to ask this question.
Sure.
That light has to be aimed from, someone has to go up there on the cherry picker and aim it where it's pointed?
Yeah.
That, you can't do that from here.
No, most of your lights would require being physically pointed at where they want to go. So, so if you ever did want to move things around or reposition them, you could. It would just require someone going up there.
Or you splurge for the expensive lights that move.
We have two, one of which works.
Yeah, those are spots.
I did notice the second one is actually unplugged. Is there something more wrong with it? Or is
The
it...
gears are stripped out of it,
Okay.
so we'll probably talk to you at some point.
Sure. So that is how you control color on an individual fixture. The third color option, and I think this is going to be less useful to you, but just so you're aware it's there, is each light has, so the light I have selected is actually mixing red, green, blue, and white. So I can manually control each of those from this third color mixing option. This is more direct control. It's going to be slower. It's going to be easier to use the other two options. But like if I know I just want those red LEDs and nothing else, I can select which attribute and then just drag up or down because it's all just touch screen. So it's like a virtual fader. So like right now I have all the red and all the white, and it gives me sort of a whitish pink. Or I can say white and blue, and it gives me sort of this, lighter blue.
So you're mixing the color channels.
Yeah, mixing it directly as opposed to.
One of my, looking at this, if all the lights were on, it's still pretty dark on stage. So you're dealing with the most saturated color. Is that why it's so dark, or?
There's other lights that are called, what's that, upstage, I guess, or
Yeah.
something. They're not on right now. But
And
there are
then-
lights
At the
in
moment,
back.
I'm only adjusting one light.
Okay, well, even if you had 10 on, 10 at that same color
There's
is
lights
not.
behind the other curtain, though. that
Yeah,
light
yeah,
up
they're
the
not
back.
Okay, and is it controlled by this board then?
Yes.
Okay, didn't know.
Sure. But so those are our three ways of controlling color. And as far as darkness versus lightness, one of the advantages to LEDs versus putting a piece of gel in front of a light is LEDs, you're adding light when you mix color. Whereas putting a gel, you're actually subtracting light. You're filtering light out to get the last color you want to stay. So LEDs, you can sort of get that saturated blue and be a lot brighter than you would be if you just put a piece of gel in front of an older conventional fixture. But so we can do that for each of our channels. And I could select multiple channels. So if I came here, I can press each of these buttons to select or deselect the light, or I can just bring them up manually. But right now, let's say I want to bring up the first 8 channels. So all 8 of those pars across the front. The first,
That's what was happening to me. It's like the one would go out when I would hit the other ones, and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong.
why is that one not that? Oh, it's because I set the colors weird. That's why. I'm just going to do this. All right. So right now I've got 8 lights selected, one of which is not working. Light number 2, I'm not sure why. But so I've got the first 8 lights, which now the stage is much brighter.
And
And
on there, it shows that it's working.
yes, because it is telling the light to do something. It doesn't know that the light, for whatever reason, is not operating.
When we look there, where's 1 and where's 8?
1 is on your left, 8 is on your right.
Thank you.
Which the way I've relayed out this channel map, because you can customize this, is an approximation of what you'll be looking at.
Oh, I see.
Before it was sort of laid out more like grouped by what things do as opposed to visually where they are in the space. So I've tried to make it a little clearer. But so 1 through 8, which is that front pipe of lights, we can do the same sort of color control by coming in here, and now I've got them all selected, and I can make them all red or all blue.
How did you select them all?
So when you bring a fader up, by default it will select it, or you can press the buttons to select or
Okay.
deselect.
I see.
So right now they're up, but they're not selected. The lights have gone dimmer. There's no green box around my channel. But if I reselect them, I can now make changes.
When they were off just a
Mhm.
minute ago, how come the lights weren't totally off?
So deselecting the light
Yeah.
doesn't turn it off. It just says that I'm not going to be making changes to it.
Okay.
So right now, if I were to only want to change the color on that first light we were looking at before,
Yeah.
they're all up, but I only select the first light, and then I can make the first one red. And the rest stay
So
blue.
to turn that light down, you would have to push that
Yep.
down. Okay.
When you deselect, would that be the point that you would put that into a memory?
We can put things into a memory, a number of, whether it's selected or not. Basically, when you record a memory, it's going to grab everything that's on stage. So we'll look at that next, because that's going to be more often how you want to use things, because we'll have...
I also want to ask a question
Sure.
before you move on to that one. With regards to the movable spotlight.
Yes.
Is that one of the 8?
No, the movable one, the one that's working anyway, is number
Yeah, the one that's
15.
working. And how do you position that? I'm only asking
Sure.
because we have this big bulky spotlight that I've been having to use and hold it like this for the entire time. And if I could do this instead, that would be very
Sure.
helpful.
I think we'll work
So
towards that.
using
Please.
if people are always going to stand in the right place,
Yeah.
then programming that light will be helpful to you. If you're trying to use it like you would a spot where you're following someone who's moving sort of
Yeah.
all willy-nilly, it's not going to be very helpful, because like controlling it live is very
This is very hard to use as a follow spot, is that what you're saying?
correct. Even on much better consoles, high-end stuff used on Broadway, it's hard to beat an actual follow spot.
All right, so let's assume they're going to be stationary
Sure.
or relatively so.
So what we'll do, first just deselect everything here. So 15 is our spot, right? So if I bring that up right now, it's pointed at the flag, because that's the last thing the board told it to do.
Right.
But if I want to move it, let's say I'm back here on this screen, I see that I've brought it up, but I don't have any information about where it's pointing right now.
Where is it on the board right now?
It's number 15.
That's that one that's lit up.
So to control its position, we're going to do similar to like we did for color. We're going to look at this little teardrop and fader button, which is our parameters button, all the different things the light can do. We're just going to look in there. And now we have an option called beam, first we have an option called position, we have an option called color mix, and we have an option called beam. And those are different categories of the things lights can do. So position will give us our pan and tilt.
Okay.
And just like color, we have more than one way to think about position. Right now, it is showing me a little grid. Just make this. So it's showing me a grid, and that is just a visual representation of pan and tilt. And I can, just like I could drag my finger for color, that light's going to spin around as I do this. I can just point to somewhere else on this grid, and it's going to move.
Okay.
Wow.
Now, this grid is not a perfect representation of your stage, but if you're used to using it, you might know that, like, if I point it here, it's going to do one thing. In fact, I think this is sort of backwards from your stage, unfortunately. But so you could sort of get familiar with how this grid works, and like if you're used to, like, I know pressing here will make it do one thing versus pressing here will make it do another.
Oh, it's way back there.
Better put it back on the flag, right?
So let's assume that you're going to have it on the flag,
Sure.
and that's where you know the person's going to be, or a piano player or whatever. You don't obviously want to do it while they're, coming on.
Correct.
So you can like Al said, you pre-program this part.
Yep.
Okay.
The other way to control position, just like we could step between different ways of looking at color, if I press the position button again, it now just gives me a numerical value for pan and a numerical value for tilt. And that's going to be a value between 0 and 255, because on computers, everything is based on bits. So 256 bits is 0 through 255. And if I just press that square, I can then roll up or down and basically it's a virtual little fader here. And I'm just slowly adjusting how much it's panning. And then I can click the tilt and I can slowly adjust up or down by tilting in the appropriate direction.
So you could technically follow somebody a little bit if they're not like jumping from one side of the stage to the other.
Yeah. You could. It would be difficult to do smoothly, though.
Control it with a roller ball mouse or not?
I believe if you had a mouse connected, you could like click and drag on that grid, but you wouldn't be able to just do like a trackball.
Gonna do a trackball on it?
Because
The trackball going to the mouse board.
the trackball would just basically move your cursor. Unfortunately, it wouldn't actually directly control the light.
And while you're on there,
Yeah.
how do you make the spotlight bigger or smaller?
So that is what our beam functions are.
Okay.
So if you take a look here, so for beam, it now gives me a few different options, which are all the different things the fixture can do. Many of these you're not going to do much with. I don't actually think this light has a zoom, but it does have a focus, so how sharp or soft the light looks. So focus, if I press that button and I scroll up or down, you can watch as that I sort of get a harder edge to the circle.
Right.
I can find sort of where it's sharp.
So you can't really adjust the size on that.
On this one, I don't. Oh, actually, it does have a zoom. I'm just blind. Right now, we're at zoom 0, so it's as small as it's going to get.
Okay.
But the third square here is zoom. If I press that, I get this little green arrow, which, if you can see past my finger,
Now I can.
tells me it's selected, and I can do that sort of.
Same with the video.
Yeah, the zoom might be broken on the fixture, unfortunately. It's supposed to zoom. I don't know what condition the light is
on the board.
in. Some fixtures you can. I'm not sure about this one. It does, actually, yes. So.
That's probably why it's not working. Probably need to reset.
Let's do that.
I'm gonna home out.
Excuse me, this is mine.
So, yeah, I think it is in the middle of trying to reset.
But it's homing.
Yeah.
When it's done, it'll point straight down and go back to level.
You can't break that light by anything you do on the board, right?
Not unless you get mad and start throwing stuff.
I mean, I'm not going to say you can't, but it wouldn't be easy.
I've broken boards.
Somebody stripped the gears on the one.
Right.
That's, I think they use those
So let's
disco
see.
lights on them.
Because it is possible if like an internal gear or belt is bad that the zoom wouldn't be working.
Put in all patterns and circle and stuff.
And so there's probably
Is that
some
what
level
was
of
happening?
inertia
Things was
as
just moving
well.
on their own. Probably just needed to reset it too.
Yeah, unfortunately, the zoom doesn't seem to be functioning.
Okay. Still not working. Okay.
But
Maybe it's not in the right mode.
It's good to know.
but these might also not be.
You got a shutter on it?
I was trying to bring up a gobo, but I think even that's something is misaligned.
Can you move it more to center stage because it looks like we really can't see it.
Something else going on.
Yeah, hold on.
Now you got the disco ball.
No,
That's the.
I was trying to tell it to do something, and I think it is having problems.
Keeping that big spotlight thing for a while.
Resetting it. So unfortunately, I think these fixtures may not be in the best of shape, so they're experiencing some issues.
Those are LED as well?
They
Yeah.
appear to be, yeah.
Actually, that one's almost new. Well, 5 years or 6 years now, but not used. I don't think much.
It's stationary.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll assume we're not going to be using that.
So it's a little glitchy without giving it some real troubleshooting. I'm not sure what's working or not on the fixture, but in theory, it would have that functionality.
Okay.
But regardless of what we set our colors or the position of the mover on, when we record things, and it looks like previously, whether this was back when Savannah set things up for you a few years ago, or if it's stuff you guys have done since, we have these paper labels and previously some other labels, sort of telling us what some of our recorded looks are. So when the channel 1 through 40 button is pressed and is highlighted blue, we have direct control of our channels. When our playback button is pressed, just below that, which we can have many pages of. Right now we're only going to have page 1. But when I press playback 1, you'll notice a lot of these buttons now have sort of a pinkish light under it, which is indicating that it's a playback.
So then you can't control these while you're in playback mode.
You sort of can, because someone was smart and set up your first 16 or so faders to just be your first fader is the first light. They pre-programmed a look for that light, and so on and so forth for each light. But the bottom section here, 21 through 33, we already have some recorded looks here. And so someone previously set up a full stage look. And maybe it needs some tweaking, or maybe at some point you'd want to adjust sort of depending on what you have pointed where. Maybe you don't want every light, but right now, what that first fader is programmed to do is it's bringing up those 8 across the front, plus the 4 that are right behind that first curtain.
Now, if you wanted to, at this very point, let's say there wasn't anything happening on the right-hand side of the stage, you could just bring those out, or it's just locked. Or could you go to those, the top 8 and shut some of
So
them
the
down?
board will always listen to the last thing you told it to do.
Oh, okay.
The highest value will win. So right now, if I've got full stage up, and then I also bring up that first fader, when I bring full stage out, the first light stays on,
Yeah.
because that's the highest value.
Gotcha.
The last thing we touched.
Yep.
So full stage look,
Yep.
is that's the brightest that it can get?
I mean, right now there are some lights that actually aren't on. There's some blue side light which is not recorded into this.
Okay.
Um,
So it can get brighter.
The ones are up are all
but not much.
full.
This is most of these lights at full right now.
That would help me during the whistle.
Some of the other ones that were pre-programmed here, you have a curtain warmers, which is sort of a dim greenish color. I guess you have a curtain that closes. Someone probably picked a color that looks okay on the fabric. And it's just sort of a glow, so it's not a dark curtain when you have it closed. Someone recorded sort of by area, so down right, which stage direction is opposite audience direction. So down means closest to the stage, because once long ago stages were on an angle, so you were literally down, and upstage is further away because you were literally higher. That hasn't been true in centuries, but the terminology has stuck around. And so right and left for stage direction is from the performer's perspective.
Replace this one here, the mechanical one. So that's probably 5 years
I'm
old,
sorry. Thank you.
maybe 4.
You could probably finesse it.
So,
A lot of finessing with these boards.
yeah. So let's say, this isn't the most beautiful stage picture, but for the sake of showing you how to record something, so I can either go back to my main display by hitting this grid button, or I can record this from here. I'm going to hit record, and it's going to give me that option again. And I can record a cue, a playback, or a playback sequence. And right now, we're doing playbacks. So just like I recorded over one before, I can record to an empty one. So let's say I want to record to number 40 here. I can just tap that button like I did before. Or I can come in here and say playback memory. I could give it a name if that's helpful to me, because that might display on the screen for certain things. But from here, it's going to prompt me to press the bump button I want. But I could also change some information of like, does this grab just the selected channels? Or is this grabbing everything that's active? By default, it's always going to record everything that's active. But let's say you only want to record the things you've selected. There are sometimes reasons to do that. You could come in here and hit selected instead of active. But we're just going to tell it to grab everything. And I'm going to just say include options and press the button. So now, if I come back to playbacks, you'll see 40 now has that purple. And if I bring,
So now you had this all the way down when you did that.
yep, the fader doesn't have to be up
Doesn't
to
matter,
record
okay.
to it.
All right.
But because I had some channels selected, I'm basically going to bring them up and take them back down because it's going to listen to the last information. But now when I come back here to playbacks, number 40, I can bring up. And I can bring it back down. And now this will control those lights and bring them to that color. Even if they were, let's say I'm in my full stage look. In the full stage look, they're not in that orange. But orange is going to be, well, actually in this case, full is all of it at white. So let's say I have them up in orange here. That's not all the colors at full. But if I come into full stage wash is going to win because the value for the colors is higher. It's going to mix to the highest
So
values.
highest takes precedent,
Yeah.
not last takes precedent.
So then just as a review, let's say I was, adjusting one of these and then I was like, oh, I don't like what I just recorded. So you want to get rid of this record now if you wanted to delete what you did because you were like, oh, that's
Sure.
not what I want.
If we want to completely delete a playback, we can come to record/edit, and I have an option called erase playback. So I can click that, and yeah, that's an ugly look. So I'm going to delete
So you
that
just
one.
click that one.
It's going to always ask me, am I sure?
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes.
Gotcha.
And now that playback has no
Okay,
light
cool.
on it.
Gotcha.
Also, we have an undo button. It won't let you undo a ton of things, but let's say the last thing you did you're not happy with. You can click undo, and it will just basically it'll only let you undo. It'll only let you undo the most recent thing you did. So like I just hit undo, it undid my deleting of that playback.
Oh, okay.
But once I do something else, I can't undo a second thing.
Right,
Like,
sure.
it only lets you undo the very last thing. And once you click undo, until you do something else, you have a redo button. So I'm like, oh no, redo. I did want to delete it.
So let's say you had all 40 channels up and running,
Yep.
and you recorded a sequence.
A playback. Yeah.
Playback. You don't have any memory limitation, any memory worries?
It would take a lot. Technically, yes, there is a limit to how much the drive in this will hold. You're never going to encounter it.
Just curious.
But
Is it a hard drive in there?
there is,
Solid state?
I forget the exact type of drive, but there is probably flash memory in here, I think.
Okay.
So it has internal memory. It's always a good idea to save and export to a USB key as well, especially if you have a way you like to sort of restore this to after an event. Save that as like your default file, and you can always reload it no matter what someone's done to the board. We will. And before I leave today, we will go into how that gets done. So, like I said, though, you have up to 40 playbacks on a single page. But let's say you are doing different shows and you do just want to say all of these bottom row is, this for. I'm unfamiliar with what types of shows you do in here, whether it's like theater or concerts or what. But let's say you have multiple things that are coming in here. You're like, I want a page of these that is for this show we're doing, this play. You might put it on page 1, playback 1, and have this whole bottom row filled with 20 cues that you move between. But let's say on the next Sunday you have a concert coming in and that wants its own separate set of looks. We can add additional pages. So if I were to set a look, doesn't matter what it is, I just bring a bunch of lights up. It can look ugly for now for the sake of it. But I've got a bunch of things on, it's all doing something, and I want to record to a second page of playbacks. If I hit record and playback memory, it brings me to, actually that It's not where I thought it was. Hold on. There it is. So playback 1 is the page we're on. But if I double tap that button, I get a little menu that pops up that says sequence rate or select page. We haven't done sequences yet, so don't worry about what that means. But select page will let me move to more than one page of playbacks. Maybe this is helpful to you, maybe it's not. Maybe you'll only ever do stuff on playback page 1. But if I say select page, it's going to give me 10 pages I can select. And I'm going to select page 2, which right now if I bring everything back down on my faders, lights are still up because they were actually brought up on page 1, and it will leave that information until I bring the fader down. So that info is up on page 1, but page 2, I have no purple lights. Nothing is recorded. So if I wanted to record to this second page, as long as that's my active page, I can say record, and now all of them are green, meaning they're available to record on. So maybe on page 2, 21 is now this ugly stage look I've made.
I just want to backtrack for
Yeah.
a second. Some of the lights remained on when you toggled between page 1 and page 2, and you said that the ones that were on page 1 were going to stay up until you took them off. How would you do that for page 2? Like if I didn't want that spot on over
Sure.
there.
Let's go back to page 1.
So if you could do a few things. You could
Without messing up the page 1 that somebody might have set for the play, and now I'm setting up for the concert. On
So
page
I
2.
used page 1 to bring up a bunch of lights
Right.
that I then was trying to record to page 2. I'm not going to record over anything that's on page 1.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
It left the lights up because it was the last thing those lights were told to
Okay.
do.
Yeah.
And when I switched pages, as long as I didn't go above their existing value, it holds on to that info.
So how would you get rid of it then?
So I could manually select them, or I can go back to that page and bring things down. But if I just select 15, I have the level wheel on the side, which does the same thing as the faders do. So I could just bring
Right. Yeah.
that spotlight to 0.
Okay.
Or I could bring it to a higher value.
So let's say you don't want the spot for this one. You would bring everything down to 0, do what you want to do, and then hit record, saving to page 2.
Yep.
Okay.
When you record, it'll be based on what playback page you're on,
Okay.
no matter where the values came
Okay.
from.
So to get rid of the values that were on page 1, on page 2, you're going to do it the way you just.
I can
did
do it manually,
Okay, that's
yes.
the way okay.
You just pulled them all down and they were still on.
Yeah,
You have to
that's
bring the
what I'm saying.
fader up and down again.
If you were to go up a little, you're basically taking that control and then coming
Right.
down, yes. But it assumes that when you've jumped pages, that you want to hold that information. Like it does that so that way you can then have that fader available again.
It just imports that into the page.
Yeah. But so if I bring up 21, which I recorded, because I've brought it up, I grabbed control of everything again, and now I can bring it all down. And it's the only one on this page. Again, this is only helpful if you really want to be saying for different shows you're going to use different pages.
Can you do inhibit faders on this board?
I'll take it you're familiar with like the EOS line of consoles. I see the IATSE shirt. So you can't make like an inhibitive submaster like you would, but you could bring down like the main playback
You would kill
master.
everything, though. I mean, you couldn't just inhibit one light. Like
No.
You say. But you could just grab it live and kill it, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
Yeah, the simplest way would be to manually grab it and turn it off. But yeah, this doesn't have that same sort of inhibitor function that the higher end consoles have. So does that make sense for how you record and record over and delete playbacks?
Can you title, let's say, the page so that you know what, or if somebody else is going to come in maybe to do the lights for that event, that like can you label it by the name of the event when you're saving things?
I don't know if you can name the pages. What?
Huh?
You can name individual cues and you can name individual playbacks, but they don't necessarily always display the way you think they will. But so, for example, if I at the top here where it says playbacks, if I tap that, it's going to bring up this other display. By default, it tries to show me a smaller version of my channel screen, which I can, by grabbing this bar here with the up-down arrow, I can sort of shrink or expand. And it's going to show me some of my playbacks. So it's showing me with sort of the names that are programmed into it. Yeah, didn't press that. And it's a little hard to see here, but like playback 1 is channel 1 down right. So it's named the same as what someone put on paper here.
I was just wondering because I thought it would be, you know, sometimes somebody gets ill and then somebody else the next night of the same event has to come up and cover it. Just, you know, be nice. Okay, that's the program. You know.
So the other things we can record, and actually at the moment, there is a whole list of cues recorded on this console, probably from a previous event. Cues are like playbacks in that one cue is the look on stage. But unlike playbacks, we don't have to manually bring up each fader. We can just hit a button that will advance us to the next cue. We're pre-programming a sequence of events that we want to happen, and every time we hit this little arrow button that looks like a play button, it will advance us to the next thing in the time we've told it to do. At the moment, it looks like there are 24 cues here from some previous event, starting with Q1, which is curtain warmer, so a look for when everyone's coming in. Video, I guess you had a video sequence playing, so they made a different look for that. And so
if you were in that now and you would hit the play, it would have been advancing those?
Yep. If I, right now, as long as this cue fader is up, if that's down, my cues will not play. But this little button in the side, the blue button, if I hit play, it will load the look that was named curtain warmer, which is this.
And then you would just hit.
From the looks of it, they brought up blue lights behind the curtain for the performers that are waiting to come on, and some lights to light up the curtain itself.
Is there like a go button there somewhere?
There is, yes.
Is that the play button also? No.
Yep.
Okay, so you would hit that again and that will change the lights now?
And if I press go again, it's
Okay.
going to load the next cue.
All right.
And you have the back button too, right?
I have a back button and I have a pause button.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sometimes board operators have itchy fingers and might hit go too soon. On a fast fade, it's going to be hard to catch, but let's say you have something that's fading over 10 seconds and they hit go by accident. If they're real quick about it, they can hit pause and it will stop the crossfade. It will give them a moment to be like, oops, didn't mean to do that. So like, I think these are all programmed into like 3 seconds. So if I were to start the next cue, which is supposed to take me back to curtain warmer, but didn't mean to, I might be like, go, pause. And like, I didn't completely stop it. Some of the things started to come up, but now I have a flashing pause button that tells me I'm like in between cues. If I press play again, it will resume. Or I have a back button, which looks like the rewind symbol. And if I do that, it just moves me back to the previous cue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This was convenient that someone had already pre-recorded a bunch of things, but having no idea what these were recorded from, maybe you want to delete them all and start over. And I can show you how to do that.
Or you can use it as a basis and just modify it.
Possibly, yeah. Sometimes it's easier to start from scratch, but something else with playing cues, if you're in your stage layout, in the top right-hand corner of the screen is a small box. The text is kind of tiny, but it's going to show you the cue you're in yellow and the next cue that is lined up in red. And it will display a cue number and the name that has been given to that cue. So right now it's showing we are in Q1 curtain warmer, and the next cue is Q2 video. specifically Q1.0, because you can actually give some like in between numbers.
Sorry.
No problem. The other way we can look at our cues is if I press the Q button up top, it's now going to show me the list. And this gives me a chance to sort of scroll through, see all my names and cue numbers by just dragging. And this shows me some information, which, so it's going to show me on the left-hand side the cue number, which is going to determine where it falls in our stack of cues, the name we've given it, how much time it takes to fade into the look, and how much time it takes to fade out of the last look. Often those will be the same numbers because it's cross-fading equally, but you could do it so they work separately if you were trying to do something more advanced. There's another column called follow, which has to do if you're trying to link two cues so one happens automatically after another. Again, slightly more advanced, probably don't need to get into right now. And then there's a column called content, which sort of gives you an idea of what changes in this cue. And we have a few different symbols. One is sort of a color symbol, one is a position symbol, and one is a beam symbol. So it's telling me that those types... It is.
That's awesome. What's the ringtone? Sorry.
I'm a huge Trekkie. It's
Me
fun.
too.
Okay.
Trying to frontier.
So this just gives you a little preview of like the type of information that changes in that next cue. Functionally, not super important to know, but like if you see that it's only the color symbol that changes, then you know your little moving light is going to stay where it is. By clicking on different cues, actually I have to be in cue edit to do this. We'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to just show you how we record some stuff. But as we scroll through, I can see that right now there are cues up to number 24.
And those cues are all timed? Like, you
They
know,
are.
this one stays on for 5 minutes, this one stays...
It doesn't tell it how long to stay on.
Oh, okay, that's
it
what-
tells
yeah.
it how long to take to fade into.
Right, yeah, okay.
It will stay up until someone hits
Until
the
you
button.
hit the... Oh, okay, because I misunderstood you
This
before.
is
I was
more
like, how
follow.
the heck did they time that out? Okay, all
That's
right.
really good.
If you wanted to, you could tell it how long before the next one happens, and that's what this follow column is for. Unless your performers are really precise, that's usually not very helpful. Because if you're like, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds until your lights go out.
Yeah, no, I just had misunderstood you in the beginning, and I was like, wow, we would actually...
Could you,
You can do it.
yeah.
You don't always want to.
Yeah, no, I would never do that.
How many people have not worked with this before?
Oh.
And then if
Okay.
we want to play with it, how do we do that? Would we just
You know,
Right.
and the next,
So I think we set up a total of 3 training sessions. One will be next month, and then the following month, and that'll pretty much be it. Everybody, we have a door swipe up there, so you want to see the Girls in Recreation, make sure you're on the AV group. I still have to, I'll create it with them. Right now it's under KLVW, but we'll make an AV group so everybody can go up there with their swipe and get into the booth and just schedule it with the girls at the office. And you can schedule time to come in and actually use the console and work on it. I think part of what we want to do is get it set up so that anybody could come in and use basic functions and at least start using faders and making it work like it was an analog board. And that might be just with these, and then also the next level would be just some scenes, I
Sure.
guess, and that would be it. So they'll help us program it for the easy stuff for anybody, and then whoever else has interest will come in and play around with it. If you want to do more advanced stuff, that'd be really, really cool, actually.
and the stuff that's online, I think this is an ETC Color Source 40, is it?
Color Source 40 AV, which is a slightly more advanced version than the Color Source 40.
Okay.
I will also forward you a link. There's a useful video library.
And there's a manual. And,
Yeah.
The
Would it
other
be helpful
thing.
to print out that manual? Because I can have Recreation can print one out for everybody, or is there one that's better than that?
I mean, that is a fairly comprehensive sort of how-to that Savannah had put together a few years ago. It'd be a good idea to probably leave it near the console, so if someone did need to be like, how do I do something? It's right there. But
I mean, mostly we have people that just want to walk in,
Yep.
and push faders. You know, this is probably a unique group that actually has interest to go to the next level.
and
I also
some of that,
would like to talk with you at some point and get recommendations if we need to upgrade any of the fixtures to get a better.
Or fix them.
Some of them look like they're not working so well.
Sure, yeah. There's probably some issues that need to be gone
All right,
through
so
with
we'll
them.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But
Yeah, after you're done with that.
sure.
You gonna put a swivel?
Are you going to show us before we read? If you were to take a USB memory stick right now,
Yep.
stick it in,
Oh,
could you copy everything that's on this board with what, its current state?
Gonna do that right now.
Okay, and also I have a question. What is a bump? You did not define it, so it's new to me.
It's next.
well-
Bump is your next in sequence.
Okay, thank you.
It's the easiest way to say it.
Oh, thanks.
So bump is if I'm in my playback pages and I just press.
So that's
bump.
only playback then?
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
I like saying
How do you turn the whole thing on? I mean, how do you,
How you turn it off at the night without wiping everything out?
So
I like that.
with our last few minutes here,
yeah, but that's
You got to back out.
the rest of it goes on when you turn that on.
so with our last few minutes here, we're going to because I'm in queues, I need to clear my queues first off. So clear queues, and now they all go off. So that was as simple as I hit clear, and then I had my option of queues, playbacks, channels. I can clear everything, which I will do just for good measure to make sure nothing's left on. So before we power this down, I'm just going to show you real quick how we save and open show files. There's a little gear icon that says setup, and that's going to give us some options: patch, settings, and files. Files is where we're going to be concerned. And now, if we wanted to, chances are you're going to have very little need to start a new file, because then you'd have to reassign all your channels and do all that. So you always kind of want to work from something you already have. But so if I were to hit open, it's going to look at what are all the files saved on this board. And when I got here today, I resaved it as January 2023, just so I had a baseline for where we were starting today. So if I were to open that right now, it would undo anything I've done because I haven't saved anything. And I could go back to how everything was when I walked in the door. I'm not going to do that at the moment. Instead, I'm going to show you we can save as, and it's going to ask me what name do I want. Or I could save and just save to the file name it currently has.
So that's where you name it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this isn't going to be like displayed on the screen necessarily. It's useful for when we want to. So I'm gonna name this.
Captain of the bridge.
It's a good thing I'm not getting texts, because my texts come out and say code to enterprise.
So I'm just gonna save this file name as test. And now it is saved. It gives me a little confirmation window.
But it's only saved on this drive.
Yes. If
It's
I want
not
to
saved on the flash.
If I want to move it to a USB key, I also come into Files, and instead of Save, I'm going to say Show Files, and then I have an option for USB to export. Or if I have a file already on the USB, I could import.
And that's everything on the board.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm going to say Export. It's going to ask, are you sure? It's going to give it the name that it's already saved as on the console. So right now I'm exporting test. I could say yes, and it gives me a little confirmation.
What size does a flash drive have to be?
Any standard flash drive should work.
256K?
I don't know if there's a minimum size. If you're using like a huge flash drive, it might not recognize it. The formatting is what matters, and most flash drives come pre-formatted in what's called FAT32.
What size is that flash?
This might be an 8, I think. Yeah. It's
8
just
megabyte?
It's just 8 gig. It's the one I just happen to have in my pocket.
How do you know when it's done copying?
It told me show data exported.
Okay.
It's pretty
It's
instantaneous.
I'm sorry, I must
If I had
Sorry.
like 200
I
cues
might have-
recorded, it might take a moment longer, but it's
Okay.
pretty quick.
That's cool.
And unlike a computer, you don't
can
need
just
to
pull
like,
it out.
yeah, you don't need to hit
Okay.
eject or anything.
Alright.
It is smart enough to, as long as you don't pull it out as you're saving, you're not going to like corrupt any files.
Could you record an individual attribute of a mover onto a fader?
I will look into that for next time. I know on other
Just
consoles
curious.
you can. I'm not sure about here. I will double check that though, because that could be.
Could be helpful with plan control.
Yeah, I will look into that for our next session next month.
So you saved it, so
Yep.
you want to shut it down.
So now to shut down, I've got a little power button. If I just hold that down for a few seconds, it will ask me, do you want to shut down / hibernate? And I'm going to say proceed. It'll take a moment. It'll basically say, don't unplug anything while it's doing this, just like your normal computer. And now it goes into its sort of hibernation. If you wanted to completely turn it off, you'd actually have to unplug the console. There's no physical power button.
Why are all the lights blinking red?
Because they no longer have a data signal because the console is turned off.